being a remote viewer and having done deep spiritual work with my soul for a very long time and traveled all over the place and met many very advanced civilizations and extraterrestrial beings, and had a chance to really talk to some highly, beings that are so far evolved beyond human beings. Some of them have told me they're 5 billion years more advanced than humanity. So you can imagine what we've done since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which is only a few hundred years. Imagine being 5 billion years more advanced. It's like this, you're talking crazy, wild, advanced. I've been on other planets and different systems and seen and interacted with people mostly through the astral dimension. For example, once my soul took me to Venus and I met a great teacher there, and I met many other beings there, and there's beings that look like human, but they're different, slightly different than us. There's like beings that are crossbred from different star systems, and so they still look kind of human, but you can tell some of them are very tall and they got very big eyes. They look very Nordic, and then you see different types. It's not like Star Wars where you got all sorts of weird things, but you can tell that there's beings with very different genetics than here. And they're much more centered in themselves and much more calm and much more advanced. For example, they don't talk a lot because they communicate telepathically. And I was really, the first time I had one of these experiences, I'm like, wow, this is pretty wild. Because, our scientists on Earth have been looking for life on all these different planets forever. But what they've been doing is looking for life in a material, biological way. But when you're in the astral dimension, so the funny thing is, surrounding every planet in our solar system, there's an entirely different dimension of vibration in which there's a whole, just the civilizations just like ours, except they're at different frequencies. So just like you're sitting in your room right now and you can't see television waves and radio waves, but they're filling the room. I mean, if I was to take a frequency meter in your room, you'd see that it was just all over the place, And so once you go to these higher vibrational states, you enter into dimensions where there's an entire world of life. Same with the sun. I mean, I've been on the sun and just had my mind blown. We think it's just a burning ball of gas, but if you could see what's on the sun, it would absolutely blow your mind. I mean, you think we got big pyramids, wait till you see the pyramids on the sun. So what I found out, is that in these different regions and in different star systems is that there's beings that are actually going through similar types of evolution that we are, but often the whole civilization is kind of like, just like I call Earth School 1st through 3rd grade. So we're like 3rd graders, and then you get occasional teachers that come here to kind of upskill people. So an Eckhart Tolle or a Yogananda or, a Rumi, those people come here specifically to shift the consciousness and help bring the vibration up to help us wake up to a deeper truth of ourselves. But there's places where there's Rumis all over the place, and that's just normal, right? And so they would be like, university level, metaphorically. And so through all my experiences, I realized that there is nothing but God. There is nothing beyond God. God is that for which there is no other. God is the only being that can create and sustain itself, and it's the source of everything in every dimension and all realities. And God is consciousness itself. It's only because God is conscious that you can be conscious. And so what I found is that God, which has infinite energy, infinite intelligence, infinite processing power, infinite processing speed, infinite creativity, is ultimately trying every possibility at once. And so the entire multiverse and omniverse, it's kind of like a horizon. You keep trying to get to the horizon, but it's just like our idea of how big the universe is changes every time we make a bigger telescope, and we're like, oh my God, there's more. And so there's no end to God, right? And so because the evolution of God never began and never ends, it's infinite. So there is no beginning or ending. Our kind of minds can't handle the truth of God. That's why people have all these kind of religious program God ideas that are so terribly anthropomorphic, human, right? They just mirror our own limitations. But I saw that the alchemists really, I think, had it right. I've studied alchemy for many, many years, and I have my own system of alchemy called Chek Life Process Alchemy that I teach in my advanced training programs and use in my clinical practice, and it's very, very effective. In fact, I was helped by Carl Jung and Rudolf Steiner to develop it. They communicated to me from the other side, and I work with people on the other side a lot, so that's nothing new for me or my wife, Angie. But, alchemy is a non-religious science of becoming conscious that what you are is really a spirit and a soul in a material body, but that the goal is to evolve your consciousness to the point where you do not need a physical form. And this is why Steiner says, for example, it's very important to engage spiritual practices because to remain conscious after death, you have to develop a light body organ for every one of your physical organs. So you'll need a light body version of a brain and a liver and a heart, because each of those create aspects of consciousness as we know it as a human being. And so he says you will no more have spiritual eyes in the spiritual dimension without spiritual practice than a fetus would have eyes in its mother's womb without a physical reality to create physical eyes. And so what I found is that at each level of consciousness or civilization, they're at a different level of self-realization. And here we're very, very body-centric, almost to the point of narcissism. And that's what scientific materialism keeps ushering in. And that's one of the forces we have to overcome is what Steiner calls the Ahrimanic force, the force of materialism, matter, automation, machines, technology, being controlled, turning over your agency of self to things like AI and computers and not really taking responsibility. For example, Steiner says, we will continue to develop advanced technologies outside of ourselves until we either destroy the world or realize everything we've created outside of ourselves is an inferior copy of what's inside of ourselves. The question is, what will come first? Self-realization or world destruction? So we are here in Earth School where we have to face these polarizations, such as evil and such as the Ahrimanic force and the Luciferic force. And that's a growth stimulus. It creates enough pain that we can't be passive. We have to sort of wake up and say, okay, do I want to keep living this way? Do I always want to be unhealthy? Do I always want to have broken marriages and screwed up business partnerships and money struggles all the time and addictions and all the stuff that traps people? But those are actually the growth stimulus. Without that, everybody would just be eating donuts and drinking beer and watching television and nobody would grow. So ultimately what I'm saying is the alchemist conception was that through the stages of alchemy, which would be more to explain than you'd probably want me to do in this podcast, we're actually evolving and developing the awareness of what the soul is and what the spirit is. And so then things like astral travel become more natural, and then remote viewing becomes more natural, and out-of-body experiences become more natural. I remember...
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely loved this, well then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.